Good morning. My name is Janet Duke, and I am a board member with the Parents Reconciling Network, which is an extension ministry of the Reconciling Ministries Network in the United Methodist Church. I'm here this morning with several other people to talk about one of several topics we're doing on how you can be an ally, a supporter, and a good parent if you have an LGBT child or if you have an LGBTQ loved one in your family. This particular topic today, I call 50 plus ways to show support for your LGBTQ child. And I speak mostly to parents, but these things also apply if your loved one is an adult or if your loved one is a sibling or someone else within your family circle. And one thing that happens is as an LGBT person becomes more and more public, their family needs to become more and more public too to show support. But trying to stage that, especially if the child is slow in coming out or wants to take it in steps, can be challenging. And even when they're full adults, sometimes I get questions, what can I do to show support? So this topic is about that, and every step you take just tells your child that you are on the journey with them. You can come out, whether someone is private or public, you can come out as a supporter. And I think the more private they are, in a way, the more important your support becomes, because that sets the tone. It sets an expectation around you and helps them start the conversation. I want to talk first about what I call independent actions, and this is really just how do you become an ally? And then I'll talk more about those that could be coordinated with your child or your loved one as they go along in their journey. But I think it's important to just set this idea that they don't have to be out for you to be an ally. So the first things I want to talk about is just independent actions you can do regardless. So I define independent action as ways parents and allies can speak and act that let their community and their child know they hold an inclusive view of LGBTQ people. And this is showing support, whether you have a loved one or not. And these actions help any LGBTQ person know it's safe to talk to you and they can be comfortable. And most of these are things you can do anytime. The very lowest level is to be a non-participant. And this means things like refusing to participate in disparagement or negative comments around LGBTQ. You don't use negative language, you don't tease, you don't listen to or repeat disrespectful jokes. And you can always think, what would I say if my child or my loved one could hear me? And I think another important thing is when this happens around you, you can walk away. You can just leave a conversation when that starts. And sometimes that can be a powerful statement of non-participation. It's also a step to develop an inclusive attitude, which means an attitude that includes LGBTQ people and issues in just day-to-day life. And there's so many ways you can do this. One is to make proactive efforts to talk about LGBTQ people and ideas. And I really want to emphasize this point of avoiding silence. Occasionally I hear from parents who think their child may be gay or may be lesbian, but hasn't said anything yet. And one of the things that makes it hard for a child to come out is that something is never mentioned. Silence makes topics seem taboo. And merely talking about LGBTQ issues around you in the world can make it easier for your child to talk to you, not only to come out, but just to continue to talk to you. You could discuss news stories or current events. There's so much going on about discrimination, bullying, gay marriage, bathroom bills. You can see a bumper sticker or a poster or something in the newspaper that you could mention and discuss. You could comment on celebrities or politicians or advocates who either are LGBTQ or who support LGBTQ and talk about why their work matters. And that work doesn't necessarily have to be around LGBTQ. They could be working for the environment, for the vote, for whatever, but recognizing them in a positive way and talking about them when they're known to be LGBTQ just shows you have an inclusive attitude and look at them just as you would any person in your community. A next step would be outreach, and this is where you really start to establish relationships with LGBTQ that you may know in your community. You could encourage, if you encounter someone through sports or friendship, if it's a youth, you might meet them through a school activity. If it's an adult, you might meet them at work. And one thing you want to do, particularly with young people, is overcome their invisibility. One thing that happens, especially in the middle school, high school age, is a lot of LGBTQ kind of get marginalized, kind of pushed to the side. They become a little bit invisible. And if you can just be friendly and normal to these people as you would to any other person, and just make sure to reach out and include them, that's very helpful. If it's an adult or someone that lives nearby, you could extend invitations to shared activities. You can invite them to dinner or come over to watch a game. Let's go to a movie. You could walk dogs together in this time of pandemic when we can't do very many things. You could ask them to join some group activity, sports or music or gardening or whatever. And the point is just have ordinary conversations with them as ordinary people, but establish a relationship. I think one of the things, especially if you've not had a friendship or a relationship with an LGBTQ person, it's something we don't get involved with until we are involved with that. So you have to learn along the way, that they're just ordinary people with ordinary lives, and you will have probably a lot in common. And that kind of outreach also makes it easier for your child to keep coming to you and talking. When you get more positive about what you want to do, you can begin to take a stand. Instead of just walking away from a conversation, you can confront someone who says something negative. You can object to a derogatory comment. That's not funny, or that's a hurtful thing or a mean thing to say. You can ask them directly, what if a gay person was right here? And most people do not know that if you know 100 people, estimates are 3 or 4 of them are LGBTQ. So just pointing out to them that what they say can be hurtful for someone they don't know can be helpful. I have a friend who found out about 3 or 4 months later that one of the men in the group he was talking to was gay, and he had been making some very disparaging gay comments. And he felt awful about it and finally went back and apologized. But this kind of awareness can avoid that situation. You can also correct your child or siblings or relatives if you hear negative comments. This is kind of a thing you have to feel your way through, but if you feel up to taking a stand, I would encourage you to do it. You can criticize the negative examples in TV or news or movies. Sometimes you'll see something that is very much a caricature or insulting or stereotypical or just unkind or untrue. And you can talk about that in your family or just bring it up in conversation. People are very complex, and sometimes a caricature particularly just emphasizes one thing. So you can explain why you found it objectionable and how that might have been made positive. For instance, if they're being insulted because they're protesting for LGBTQ rights, you could point out that they're trying to change unfair laws, or that it's none of our business whom they love. So depending on how willing you are to take a stand, there are a number of things you can do to make other people aware that not everybody around them feels that same way when they make negative comments. You can go further too and be a public advocate. You can donate to organizations that support LGBTQ rights. If you join something like the Human Rights Campaign, they have bumper stickers and decals. You've probably seen the little blue squares with an equal mark in them, and that's what that is. You can participate in events in your area, go to pride events or celebration or marches. Social media posts are one way to show it. You can show up at school board or public forum meetings. And it was touching to see in some of the recent debates about bathroom bills, how many families showed up supporting the LGBTQ community that didn't have an LGBTQ member themselves, but they just were standing up for what they felt to be right. You can vote for inclusive and supportive office holders, and websites make finding this out very simple. You can encourage your church or temple or mosque to support LGBTQ members. And I want to point out that when I say that, I think you really have to urge not just support, not just tolerance rather, but actual support and full inclusion. You hear a lot people say, well, everybody's welcome here, but what that often means is as long as they just don't show that they're LGBTQ. Often you'll say, you'll hear terms like hate the sin, love the sinner. And I assure you, LGBTQ people know who you think the center is. So this is not just letting them in the door. This is actively reaching out and including them fully in the life of your faith group. That can be hard to do. It's very hard to do even within the United Methodist Church, as you know. But one interesting thing I found through Strong Family Alliance, which is my nonprofit that runs a website supporting LGBTQ parents and their children, is that almost every faith group has a group within them that advocates and supports for LGBTQ. So the Hindus, the Muslims, the Mormons, the Jews, the you know, just literally every group has somebody there working. So you can connect with them and then try to help your faith community or religion become more open, accepting, and welcoming. So you could support that group's efforts and represent them in your organization. You can also come out anonymously as a family member who has an LGBTQ child or loved one. You learn all you can. You try to really educate yourself. There's lots of places where you can do that. And some of the supportive websites are listed here. Strong Family Alliances, mine, PFLAG, Human Rights Campaign, there are others. But on all of those, you will find links to books and videos and blogs and articles that can really help you learn more. So it's a great place to start. And then you can seek out stories to better understand what the experience is of other families and of LGBTQ. Again, on Strong Family Alliance, we have a section of family stories where parents have written their stories, their experience in their child coming out. Itgetsbetter.org is an interesting one. It's really targeted more at LGBTQ, but it's stories about how things can get better if they're struggling, how things can get better over time. And then you can just search online for LGBTQ stories. You'd be astounded at how many you can find. You can share your own story in a private and confidential way. There are several websites where you can do that. Some people write an anonymous article for a magazine or a newsletter. You can find a confidential or private support. Sometimes you just need to tell somebody who you are and what you're working on, and that can be an affirming therapist. A couple of places online where you can actually sort for a therapist that is affirming are betterhelp.com and mywellbeing.com. So if there's not someone in your community that seems to be welcoming and supportive, you can find them. You can talk to supportive or accepting clergy, and particularly in reconciling communities in our church, you can normally find those. Or you can join a support group. Like PFLAG has over 400 support groups nationwide. However, that seems like a huge number, but really 400 when you think the United States is not that big. But we are finding increasingly that local groups sometimes exist too. So again, you can look for local resources, and it can be as small as 1 or 2 parents who have a child as well. Just someone that you can talk to and work with to get encouragement and ideas and support. Now, so far, all of these are just about being an ally. These are actions you can do alone. You don't even have to have an LGBTQ family member. Anybody can do this. But if you're a parent, these can all allow you to be more inclusive and be more active, but also preserve your child or loved one's privacy if they're not ready to be public. It lets others know you have an inclusive view and you can do these things anytime you're comfortable. And it shows support and helps any LGBTQ person know you're a safe person to talk to. I have had a couple of other youth come to me to come out before they went to their parents, only because they knew the work I did and they wanted to talk to somebody. So sometimes just being open can help other people speak to you. It opens the conversation when you do actions like this. It helps LGBTQ feel that they can have dialogue and there's understanding there, and you're just someone that they can talk to. But it is very important as you do this that you not out somebody beyond their wishes. If it's never your story to tell, it's that individual's story. And anything that comes out about them, they will bear the scrutiny and questions. So if your child is not ready for, let's say, the school to know, or her Sunday school class to know, or his sports team to know that they're LGBTQ, then do not in any way out them. That has to be their choice when they're ready. So then I want to talk about coordinating with your child. How do you go about telling others and being more open? All of the things I already mentioned, you can go ahead and do as long as your child or your loved one is comfortable with them. But I define this as telling anyone your loved one is LGBTQ, anybody, and that includes friends and family and anyone your child has not told. Now, this can be complicated. Sometimes you don't know if you should or not, and I want to emphasize this should really be coordinated with your child. Their privacy or openness is the guide that you want to follow, and the timing depends very much on their comfort level. It could happen really quickly. For instance, if a child is transgender, once they begin transitioning, there's not too much you can do to keep things private. Or you could have a child that desires to be out quickly. For instance, historically, in about 20 years ago, the average age of coming out was in the mid-30s. About 10 years ago, it was in the 20s. Now the average age of coming out is about 14 to 16. So occasionally we have adults who come out and have been very private, but now they want to be out and they desire to do it quickly. And if you have an adult child that's in that role, then you can be very open about them. But wherever they are, you want to coordinate. It can take years. You may live or they may live in a conservative or a condemning location where they just don't feel safe or comfortable. There may be a lack of resources or a lack of community that they can connect with. Because of that, they prefer to stay in the closet, or they don't want to risk losing the community they have. And this is something you see particularly in the maybe high school age, where kids are beginning to date and go out. And I've seen a couple of different instances where a young person came out to their family, and after a few months thinking about whether they wanted to be more public about it, said, you know, I think I made a mistake. I'm not really gay. I'm not really lesbian. And went back and started dating kind of normal high school stuff. And then in college came out again. And it could be that they had a great community and a great time and they were happy and didn't want to lose that. Though they wanted to come out, they were wanting to do it in a time and a place where they wouldn't lose the community that they had. It could happen at a transition, and this is very common. Often it happens when a child moves away from home, often to go to college. Sometimes they get all the way through college and they start a new job and they want to start as a new sort of position in their life, and they come out then. Sometimes it's with the start of a new relationship. Several things can trigger when they're more comfortable to be more open, but you have to have good communication with them to know where they are along this. It could never be public. I know several adult children who, for personal or professional reasons, have no desire to be public. They live in an unaccepting environment, or they live in a very high profile professional world, and they just don't even want this to be part of the discussion. So again, how do you know where your loved one is? And you have to try to sync up. The other thing, and this makes it a little sticky, is it can change over time. They may take years and then suddenly come out very quickly, or they may be coming out pretty quickly and then sort of, come to a screeching halt. So good communication and talking to them, and I'll talk more about that, is really important as they go through this process. Things to remember, again, it's not your story to tell. If you need to tell your story, and really this is how a lot of kids get outed, the parent or someone in the family just has to talk to somebody, and that's very understandable. But you need to find a counselor, or maybe you can journal or tell your story anonymously. But however strong your impulse is to call your sister or your brother or your mom, you really need to take a breath and think about that, because your child has a relationship with all those people also. And it can run through the family really fast, and if your child is not ready for that, that can be a great disservice to them. You really want to keep pace. Know their comfort level is most important, and good communication is key. And all of those things you did to be an ally, all of those times you talked about LGBTQ topics, all the times you raised the conversation so they don't always have to talk about it, all help build communication. Then you just have to ask. Get permission. If you want to tell your sibling or your best friend, just ask them, would you mind if I talk to Aunt Joe about this? They might say yes. They might say no. They might say, can I think about it? But whatever, you have shown respect for their position and what they want, and it builds communication. And if you abide by what they ask, it also builds trust. I think you want to judge your audience too, particularly in early days when you might be emotional, or I was certainly emotional. You have to really think about who you're talking to. Will they break confidence or gossip? Lots of families have someone who's kind of the central switchboard. And then also, will they have a strong reaction? And particularly, this is a concern with grandparents often. Are they going to have a really negative reaction? And I've talked to more than one family where one set of grandparents knows that a child is gay, the other set of grandparents doesn't know, and they have no plan to tell them because the child wants all of those relationships kept. They want to have grandparents on both sides, and neither he nor his family feel like they can be frank and still have that. Maybe someday they can, but that's the kind of navigating that you may have to do within your circle. If your child is only out to you, so what can you do? And this is very common. Lots of times kids come out to one person first. So first you can be an ally, try as many of those things as I talked about, and you can learn to do more as you go along. And you can talk to your child, and if they're out to the family, you can talk to the family about the things that you're trying to do. If you have a conversation that you walk away from, or if someone makes a joke that you disagree with, I think you should tell them that, so they kind of know you're working on this also. You can be prepared. I think that some confidences can be really hard to keep. It's very common that they come out to one parent before the other. So you might hear, please don't tell dad, or don't tell mom, or don't tell whoever. It's really hard to come out, and they may need to take it in stages. No, it doesn't mean that these people will necessarily never know. It just means that your child is just not quite able to handle that yet. They may have an instinct or a concern that they can't express. And I think it's really important to respect their wishes and show that they can trust you, and prepare perhaps for later reactions. This was a situation I was in where my daughter said, please don't say anything to dad yet. And it was not a long time, but once she did talk to him, or actually asked me to talk to him, he said, how could you not tell me? And I just had to tell him, she asked me not to, and it's her story. And I knew she would eventually come to you. So it can be difficult, but if you're trying to preserve the relation with your child and also help keep them safe, please try to abide by their wishes. Listen more than you talk. While you're getting informed, bear in mind that this might be really new territory. And if you can be their safe place where they can come and talk and appreciate the love and honor that they show you by being honest with you, then this will build communication as much as anything, because there's two sides of communication. There's from the parents to the child, and from the child to the parent. And children tend to talk most when you're a good listener. I would also say sometimes you're going to hear things that may make you uncomfortable, or kind of go, ugh, I don't know about that, or I don't like that person, or whatever. But give them a chance to talk to you and be a good listener, and you will learn more, and be there for them when they do have a question or need help. If they're out to a trusted few, then again, keep pace. I think it's really important that you don't ask your child to stretch, but you don't hold them back. They might want to tell somebody that you're kind of going, I don't know about that, but that's their call. And you can support them in that and back them if it turns to be a problem. But you also don't want to hold them back, even though you may have a concern. If they want to talk to somebody, try to maybe express what you're worried about, and then say, I'm with you. If asked, be willing to help tell others. They may want you to go with them. Will you talk to dad with me? Or you may be sent. Do you mind Or if I say, can I talk to Aunt Joe? Then they would say, no, that'd be good. Why don't you talk to her? So if they want help, you can help. You don't want to get in the middle of it if they don't want help. Ask permission if you want to tell someone. If your child knows this person, please bear in mind it's their relationship too, whether it's a teacher or a close friend or whatever. So they have a say in what that person knows. Ask how you can help. Sometimes they want help and other times not. And it's really important that they stay in control. I had an experience at one time when my daughter was in high school and she was being bullied really badly. She had her locker graffitied at school and her car damaged and spray painted and some other things. And I did not know about all this until the summer. And I said, oh my gosh, why didn't you tell me what was going on? And she said, I couldn't tell you because it would have been like calling in the mafia. You would have been in the principal's office and on the counselor's desk, and it was so horrible. I didn't want to make it any worse. Well, that was hard for me to hear and hard for me to realize that she didn't feel she could turn to me, but it also let her stay in control. And I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot about how to step back and wait for her to ask. I could offer, but I had to wait for her permission. It was her life and her experience, and I wasn't going to be there for every second of it. Keep the conversation flowing. This is something I think sometimes, especially early on, we forget to do. Just talk about normal things about life and school and work and friends and sports and how's your car running or whatever. Don't make everything about being LGBTQ. That's a small part of who they are, an important part, but they're still the same person you've known and loved all this time. And finally, try to keep your worries to yourself. You don't want to lay your fear on your child. I assure you they have enough of their own. And also, sometimes our worries are driven by other things, just parental concerns. And I think it's important that we try to keep those to ourselves. Talk to them when it's something you think they really need to know, but not about why you're worried. It's more about things they might need to think about. If a child is out to some family or friends, I really want to encourage you to be a welcoming home. Invite their friends to their home and to your home rather, and make an effort to know all of their friends, but particularly the ones they're close to. I would also say, don't assume relationships. A lot of times, some of them are just friends. So don't assume everything is about romance. I would also say something that often happens in high school, maybe because young people are figuring out their own identities, but it's not uncommon that some of their friends will drop away. For whatever reason, they don't want to be associated, or they don't want to, I don't know. They have their own reasons, but that makes the friends that stick by your child even more important. So if your home is a place where they can bring them, that is a really wonderful thing. Plus you get to know their friends. You want to get your statements and answers down pat. Now that they're beginning to come out, you need to find positive and affirmative ways to answer if somebody asks a question or implies something, and practice talking about this until you have the words down comfortably. You're an ally now and you need to act like it. And the other thing you want to do is, again, stay in lockstep. Ask your child how to handle questions. If you don't exactly know how to reply to somebody, you might turn it off and then ask your child later, someone said this to me today. I wasn't sure what to say. What would you like me to say if that comes up? So find out their answer and parallel them. And this is much more common with a child than with an adult. But if you have a young person, then it's important to learn how to say things at a level that is right for them. Be a buffer if needed. Keep your balance if someone else is emotional or critical. And again, this often happens within the close-knit group of a family or as friends that you've known a long time. Don't let them grill your child. You may have to step in and just turn the conversation. And you might have to talk with your child about possible gossip, though actually in this day of social media, they are well aware of it. But help them be realistic, that others may talk, and that can be good or bad. Actually, I've seen young people use gossip as a way to avoid telling people themselves. So again, you have to kind of take your child's guidance on how they want these things to play out. If a child is progressively more open, then you want to grow with your child. Be more open as they're more open. Make their identity really ordinary. Talk easily about this as well as all these other topics I mentioned. But this is when you want to start being ready for dating and relationships. And in another topic I talk about the process that parents sometimes go through and how sometimes steps you think you're past crop up again, and dating is one of those. It's especially for a child that comes out in middle school, when they get into high school and start dating, all of a sudden you kind of go, oh, wow, and I just got that under my belt. I haven't thought about this. So my suggestion would be to try to apply consistent guidelines about dating. And particularly if you have other children in the home, this is easier to do, because if I treat Bob this way, then I'm going to treat Karen this way, right? Curfews, activities, boundaries, they're still appropriate. You want to be as consistent as you can. There may be open affection, and you want to try to, for me, this is something that was helpful. Someone suggested, think, if they were a co-ed couple, would this bother me? And that was a very helpful comment to me, to see my daughter reach out and walk down the street holding hands with another girl. And I thought, if that was a guy, I wouldn't even think anything about it. So sometimes you have to kind of work on your own point of view a little bit. And you can be a buffer if needed. If you see somebody giving your child the side eye, you may just want to step one step closer and just make sure that it's well known that they are not alone in that particular public situation. Make your home a destination. This is kind of the next level of make your home a welcoming home, but make this a place where your child's friends come, and where you make an effort to include them. And you can become a friend to others whose family may be rejecting. And I want to touch on this for just a second. My daughter brought a number of people home. Some were LGBTQ, most were not. But on Thanksgiving and Christmas, for many years, we have opened our home to other kids that might not have a place to go. And you may know that about 40% of the homeless population are LGBTQ youth. So we've had several people in our home, and it's interesting to have them come and feel at home and be welcome there. The other thing that happened in her high school time was she started dating somebody who was not out to their parents. And this is something you have to really think about. You cannot tell that other parent that their child is LGBTQ. And there are a lot of reasons, but the main one is either the child's not ready, or they would have already said, or it may not be safe, and you don't know what that relationship is like. So you can still be their friend, even if their family is not accepting or maybe even rejecting. If both you and your child are out, then you can become increasingly public. Again, work in advocacy group, talk openly with your circle of friends. And this is something particularly I see with older parents whose adult children are out. I'm surprised at how many of the parents their friends don't even know that their son or daughter is LGBTQ. And that's shocking to me. I think it's important at whatever age that if your child is out, that you be open. And that's something you talk about, and you can be a person in your circle of friends who begins to change their attitudes toward LGBTQ. And you can speak up anytime the topic comes out. You can help other families and youth, particularly when both you and your child are much more open. You can help your school start a GSA club. This is a service and social club for LGBTQ. They require one parent sponsor and one teacher sponsor, and they're nice organizations where the kids have a safe place to go and do service projects and just meet. You can recommend resources from GLSEN to teachers and counselors, and GLSEN does a lot of work about anti-bullying, equality, treatment, how you handle other people, et cetera, and they have lots of educator materials. You can be available to help. One thing that will happen as you're more open is that families who have another child coming out will start coming to you. That very often, once you're open about your child being gay, they may not be very open about theirs, but they may want to talk to you. And you can help them find resources and information, or find a resource for their child if they're needing support. You can be a friendly home, or maybe share activities, or just be available to talk. I can't think how many parents I've met over a cup of coffee, some of whom I knew and some of whom I only met that one time, just so they could talk to somebody safely about what they were thinking and feeling. And you can be that role, particularly if you're further along. And one thing that happens as you're more and more accepting is you become more and more comfortable with it. And for someone who's just in the initial throes and maybe really afraid and worried for their child, talking to somebody who's been there but has gotten past it and feels good and comfortable and safe about it is a very reassuring thing. You can be a protective adult friend. You can also, for that other person, that other youth, treat them as someone that you know, but their privacy is paramount. Again, you do not out them to others, and it's really important that you not do it accidentally or intentionally. Even if they tell their parents that this person they're going with is LGBTQ, that still is not them coming out to their parents. So it just may not be safe. They may not be ready. That's not your call to make. However uncomfortable you may be feeling like, gee, I feel like I ought to tell them, that you shouldn't. That's between them and their child. So these are some quotes I just pulled. The more you go along in these steps, I think you'll find a deeper and deeper relationship with your child. And as I mentioned on the Strong Family Alliance website, we have a place where parents can tell their story. And one thing I ask in that short questionnaire is, what would you say to other parents? And these are some of the quotes from that. There's many more stories, but I just pulled a few. He or she is still the same kid as always. You just know them better. And I think you see a lot of comments on there about, I'm just sorry they couldn't tell me sooner. I'm sorry they were alone for so long. Remember, if it doesn't all make sense in the beginning, that doesn't make you a bad parent. It's what you do from then on that matters. I think these are good stories to read, and I offer them to you. There are many others on other websites as well, but I like this last one particularly. You don't get yesterday back, but you can have a happy tomorrow. So whatever might have gone wrong or awry or not worked out in the past, that's in the past. Now you can go forward as an ally and a supporter. So I love this quote from Dr. Phil. You can be your child's anchor, their safe place. Don't ever drop your end of the rope. And I think that's even more true in terms of being a safe place for an LGBTQ child. I hope you can find your balance and help your child. And I hope these sessions, this one and the other ones that we've made available, can be a resource for you. Thank you very much for your time.